I know you probably can't tell it now, but in middle school, I used to run cross country, and we would run races, which were longer distances. And in track, I would run, a long distance. And it's been so long now that I can't even remember what the actual distance was. But I did enjoy running, and I still do enjoy jogging. But I remember one time specifically when I was pretty early on into starting doing it, and I was running, and I came out of the beginning of the race hot. I came out running fast, and I was ahead of everyone else. But we made a lap, two, three, four. I'm not sure how many it was, but I know it was over a mile, and I started to lose my breath. And by the end of the race, my chest was hurting. I was breathing so hard. I didn't have the endurance, and people were passing me. And I remember seeing my dad and him telling me, just finish the race, just finish the race. And so I pushed through, and it was a little embarrassing. I got so tired. In Hebrews chapter 12, we see Paul kind of giving some of this language about a race. He says in verse 1 of chapter 12, "Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." The reason I had such a hard time in that race is probably two main reasons. One, I didn't have the endurance. I was running the race like it was a sprint, like it was something that I was, like it was a short distance. I didn't have in mind that this was a long-term race. And so he's saying here in this short passage I just read, he's making this picture like you're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses and this crowd that's around you, and they're cheering like they were in that race that I was in. I didn't have the understanding that it was endurance, though. And he talks here about like laying aside your burdens and these weights that are holding on to you, because this is an endurance race. Your Christian life, the faith that you're going to live, isn't something that's going to be quick and just kind of bear through it. It's a lifestyle. It's going to take a long time, and sometimes it's going to hurt. But the other reason that I didn't probably finish as well as I wanted to was I started focusing on me instead of on the finish line. I started focusing on the pain in my legs and in my chest instead of looking to the finish line. And he encourages people here. He said, let's run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. If we want to finish our race, if we want to have the endurance we're supposed to do, we have to pick our heads up. We have to run this race with endurance, and we have to look at the finish line. And the finish line is Jesus. Jesus, who's already been through the pain and suffering that we can't even understand, and who is now seated at the right hand of God. That's the finish line, and that's what we've got to focus on. But right at the beginning, he says, "Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses." This used to be one of my club verses when I was in college. Our social club used this as a verse, and we talked about kind of being surrounded by each other and looking on for each other and cheering each other on. But that's actually not really the point that the Hebrew writer here is making. He's actually pointing back to chapter 11, which you may know in Hebrews as the Hall of Faith. And you have all these examples of Moses and all these people that fought, that marched around Jericho, and all these people who had faith that were from the Old Testament. And Hebrews, he's writing to these Jewish Christians who are being tempted to go back to Judaism, and he's talking about all these people of faith who were back there and how they lived their life, and how all of their lives were pointing forward to something bigger, to this finish line, the one that we have to focus on. And he's talking about these people and how Abraham had this great promise of children, of descendants like the sand and like the stars, and he never got to see them. And he talk about, Moses in the promised land and how he never got to enter into it. And you have this kind of idea here over and over again that these people had faith. Not because they were necessarily getting something out of it or that something was going to happen during their lifetime, but it's because they had their eyes on the prize. They had their eyes on the finish line, which was Jesus, even if they didn't know him by name. Luckily, you and I today, we do know him by name. We know who Jesus is. We know what he did. And so we get to look up. We get to look at that finish line and run with endurance this race that is set before us. Contrary to what some may tell you, the Bible doesn't promise a happy, peaceful, easygoing life if you become a Christian. In fact, it promises a difficult life that's like a race that has endurance. And so he says, take off every weight and sin which so easily ensnares us, and run with endurance. We're in this race. It's an endurance race. Take off the stuff that's weighing you down. The last thing you need is something that makes this race harder. Run with endurance. Run without your weights, and run looking towards the finish line at Christ.
In Jesus' name, his love is burning in our hearts like living flame.